We talked a little bit about traffic in Houston and Dallas, and basically at stations and endpoints. And so the question is, again to y'all, what are you doing, or what are your plans to ensure the termination points have sufficient parking for riders, rental car options, light rail, things of that nature? Are you, I mean, you're going to lay this from point A to point B. What role do you have in the process, or how is that going to happen?
We get this question a lot too. What do you do when you get off the train? Are you going to have the option of transit and other things? And the answer is yes, and we're working very closely with regional partners in Houston. That means Gulf Coast Rail District, Houston Metro, the county, the city. And in Dallas, that means DART and the city and the county. And you know, I live in Dallas, so I'll give the example. But you know, there's a lot of talk, a lot of investment. The DART board voted just yesterday to approve 2 new lines, and a lot of that is to not to accommodate us, but it's part of the natural growth. And we're part of that conversation. So we're working with regional partners to look at how that's going to connect to the station. But that's one of the benefits of building a station from the ground up, greenfield, is that you get to work with partners over the entire planning period to make that connectivity happen. And again, it's all about keeping the passenger in mind. The passengers have told us they want connectivity by transit, but also plenty of parking. And that parking, of course, is paid for by the project as part of our master station development.
Okay. And before he gets to the rebuttals, I'm walking slowly over here. I ran into Cliff Edwards from Commissioner Cagle's office at the very beginning of this. He's actually trying to sneak out, and I forgot to announce that he was here. So Commissioner Cagle is represented, and say hi to our friend Cliff.
My only comment to the extensions is to ask a question: who pays for the extensions to their station? And if those extensions from downtown are paid for by the taxpayer of Houston, does that not effectively make the overall trip to downtown Houston taxpayer subsidized?
Will you respond?
Thanks. I should have addressed that. The plans I referenced in DART have been on the books for 30 years. We just happened to, we located the station in the middle of 3 DART stations, and we're Amtrak and the TRE Connect today. So that was in the books for a long, long time. As are the efforts to bring commuter rail into downtown Houston from outside Harris County. We're working to co-locate or in the same part of town, not the same structure necessarily, but the same part of town as those services. And that's part of what we're working on with our regional partners, is how to do that. But those plans have been around for a long, long time.
All right, now we've reached 8 o'clock, so before I ask one final question of our panelists, first of all, thank both of you. Thanks to the Texas Central Partners and Texans Against High-Speed Rail for coming out and informing us tonight. I appreciate it. And judging by that, I think our audience does too, and I appreciate y'all, first of all, for taking an interest enough in your community to spend a couple of hours out here going over this issue. These are the kind of things that we study on your behalf every day, whether it's public education or transportation or immigration or property taxes. We're always out here delving into something, getting into the weeds and trying to figure out how to make it work and trying to figure out what it is that you all want Texas to look like as we go forward. So I appreciate you taking the time and a lot of you taking your considerable brain power to come up with some of these questions. I want to make one last pitch for you to sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already. That's how we do this. That's how I get information to you before we do stuff, so that you can come in and weigh in on how you feel about it. They're usually better looking than this because they usually have at least one picture. But they come in, basically we have 2 flavors of newsletter. We have the ones like this. This was one telling us about the deadline for FEMA recovery after the flood. So it's information that you might not get from some other source that we bring to you and make sure that you get. And the other kind is what I've been talking about all day, if I can get this thing to flip, which is notice of things that we are about to do. And that, here we go, hold on a second. There we go. And this was not a very sexy headline. House committee meets to prep for session. I do need to train my staff to be a little more punchy. But this explained to everybody who gets the newsletter that the upcoming Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committee hearing was going to discuss American law for American courts, and studying making access to the courts for people who don't want to pay for a lawyer more convenient, and studying our loser pay bill that allows, if you're sued frivolously, to get rid of the suit earlier. Well, those of you who subscribe to the new, and also at the bottom there's an advertisement for this forum tonight, some of you obviously got it. But we really like to get this information to you in time for you to be able to do something about it. And so, for those of you who have not yet signed up, if you found this informative at all tonight, please sign up for the newsletter. Again, I want to thank Sci-Fair ISD and the school, and particularly Morgan and McKenna for helping us out tonight. Thank you all very much for that. And we will end with a tough question, and it's one that I get a lot, I'll be honest with you. And it says this, essentially. Because it's a private project, if the project goes bankrupt, who will be responsible for removing the infrastructure that was put in place, and who pays for it? And it's a tough one to end on, but it is a private development.
Well, that's the amazing thing about the free enterprise system, is that we've got laws to handle projects when they just don't quite work for those who are risk takers. And we see it all the time in America, don't we? It's what makes America great, is that the private sector has the right to take a risk. And they do it after they evaluate the market. They have hard-earned dollars, just like all of us do. Some of these cases are pension fund dollars. And they're looking for long-term yields on that money. And if they make a mistake after they do all their analysis, all their metrics, and all the revenue streams, and all the capital structure, if for whatever reason that collapses, guess what? There's another entrepreneur to step right up and buy it, in some cases pennies on the dollar. And so that's the beautiful thing about the private sector. That's why we love this project, is that it is not a public project. And we know that it works because the investors have done that ridership study, and they wouldn't be putting their money into a project if it didn't work. And so it's a beautiful opportunity for Texas. It means jobs, it means paychecks, and it's a world-class mobility system for a state that's growing from 27 to 40 million.
And I appreciate his response. What I would offer is the percentage, the possibility or the probability of success here is minute. We know that private infrastructure projects haven't been built anywhere near this scale before. We know that high-speed rail worldwide is subsidized heavily. We know that those are inevitable. I'm trying to figure out how to say this properly. Let me try to put it this way. It is not enough for a private investor to play with our private land. And their analysis, I don't get that analysis. I don't know what they're making that analysis based on. We've asked for the data that's being used to evaluate this project, and we cannot get it. And so, to the extent there's private money that's risking it, we should know, because of the impact on private property rights, we have to know more than trust us. If we get it built, it'll make money. And that's what we're left with here. That's what we're left with tonight, is private industry. If it fails, then somebody else will buy it. But what about the damage that was created between those two? And shouldn't the property owner that ends up having to sacrifice, and by the way, for a lot of y'all, this land that's in your family, it may not be it may be a postage stamp in Harris County, or it may be 1,000 acres, but it's, in a lot of cases, it's a member of your family, right? It's not just a piece of property. It's a business deal, right? It's not about money. And so we need to understand the details greater before we allow a company like this to confiscate or take property. And it'd be one thing if the probability was flipped. It's probably like a 0.1% chance it succeeds and a 99.9% chance that it doesn't. If it was the other way around, I can see that, right? But this is not like that, because we know that it's not, I mean, it's a proven industry. It proves that it has to be subsidized. So we don't think for 1 second naively that this will not be subsidized. And so therefore, we need to make sure that we properly evaluate this private project.
I'm going to take moderator's privilege and ask one final question. I asked them kind of a tough one to end on, so I'll ask you kind of a tough one to end on. And the question is this, and I'll just read it verbatim. I understand your position. However, with the growing population that we have in Texas, what alternatives or solutions can you offer if we're not going to do high-speed rail?
So, infrastructure planning on a regional level or a statewide level is a responsibility of the state of Texas. TxDOT, or the Texas Transportation Commission, that $70 billion, included in that plan is State Highway 249, where that long-term goal goes up through Navasota College Station, all the way up through Waco, basically makes a parallel state highway to I-45 between Houston and Dallas or Fort Worth. Okay, so they are doubling that flow capacity there. Additionally, part of their plans that I've seen at our BVCOG, our Council of Government, our regional planning meetings, they put on display these types of plans that the state has. There's I-14, is a port-to-fort highway. That's a federal project that's going across the state of Texas. There's an additional highway. We have Highway 130, which went belly up. It's not exactly jammed full of vehicles today, if you've driven on it. I haven't driven on it. That parallels I-35, but between San Antonio all the way up to Waco, I believe, somewhere right there. The state also has envisioned an additional highway paralleling I-35 to the west side of it. I've seen the west side of Austin, out there all the way around San Antonio, all the way up to Dallas. So there are infrastructure plans that the state is planning. At the bottom line is Governor Abbott recently quoted, "This infrastructure plan will keep pace with the population growth of our state." They have more than doubled, from $33 billion over a 10-year plan, which Mr. Mosley was there when that was the plan, to $70 billion. That's the alternative.
All right. If you come to any of my events, one of the things you hear me quote all the time is Benjamin Franklin at the Constitutional Convention. When he was asked, coming out of the convention, they sort of negotiated in secret. They didn't want their deal to fall apart. And when they finally came to a conclusion, Franklin comes out into the street, and a woman asked him, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, a republic or a monarchy?" And his response was, "A republic if you can keep it." And what he meant by that was generation after generation after generation, it is incumbent on us to stay in touch, to pay attention to what's going on in our community, and not to just sort of pass it off to our representatives that we send. I'm always very proud of my district, because anytime we do something like this, we always get a big turnout. The questions tonight were amazing. If you all want to read some of them, it was really good stuff. You all put a lot of thought into this. Hopefully, you've all learned a little bit tonight about what the other side of what you were thinking thought, and if you didn't know anything about the project at all, you've learned a lot. But you're the people, you basically represent all your neighbors who weren't here tonight. And so when you go home and pass on word about how you feel about this and what you learned, you're going to have influence in your neighborhood on how these sorts of things progress. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, and we look forward to doing this again with you soon. Thank you very much.